everybody, everywhere, and welcome to another sensual episode of Movies I've Seen This Month. Alright, and now that I've capitalized on the ASMR fad, I made millions, and now we can begin the show, covered in diamonds. Welcome everybody to this beautifully diamond-encrusted episode of Movies I've Seen This Month, and this month, we got a spooky one, because it's the spooky month, and hopefully the spooky day, if I record and release this in time. The spooky day, of course, being Halloween. In the movie, of course, if you've read before you clicked, is It Follows. Released in 2014, directed by David Robert Mitchell. From what I recall, when this movie was released, it was one of those, the little movie that could sort of deals, where I believe it was mostly like an indie flick, more or less. More of an indie flick than a big production company movie, of course. And it got good reviews, got a lot of good traction and stuff. Overall, people seem to enjoy it. So, I'm a little late to the show, but I'm glad I watched this movie. It was very enjoyable. IMO. And the director, David Robert Mitchell, also directed that one movie with Andrew Garfield, Under the Silver Lake or whatever. I do plan on watching that, and I will do an episode on that as well when I watch it. Maybe I'll do that in November. Maybe November will be a month of weirdo movies. I'll watch that, and maybe The Lighthouse, because everyone's abuzz about that lately. So I'll compromise. That'll be a newer movie I review. It'll also be a weird one, but no promises. At any rate, It Follows is another movie. I'm not sure if I just don't know actors or I've just been on this trend lately. Just another one of those movies where most of the actors they're either new actors, new to the game, or I'm just not familiar with them. And even that being said, I was still very surprised. There were very good performances all around, except for I'd say the only one that was out of place was a nerdy guy friend. And he wasn't even really a super nerd. He was just a dork guy friend. He was a little weird, but aside from that, everybody else was really good, really convincing. As, how to say it, oddly aged teen to early 20 aged characters. The ages of the characters are never made clear, but you get like a rough baseball feeling of what age they should be just based on their actions and things like that. So the cast was very believable for that sort of amorphous age group. And one little point to kick off this discussion is I knew going into the movie the overall sort of rough story of it. Like, I knew there was a monster, in quotes, in the movie, and I knew what it was and like its powers and things like that before going into the movie. Not like its full range of powers, but like its main gimmick. I knew that going into the movie, and I gotta say that like that made the opening couple scenes in the movie way more intense. It was sort of like the experience you get with a lot of movies where, like, watching it a second time through, you get like a whole different appreciation of certain events. Like, it's a shortcut to that, because even though I had never seen the movie before, knowing like a rough overview of the story made me see the beginning scenes in a whole new light. That probably isn't intended by the director. I don't know, maybe it is. Maybe this was a genius move by the director to have like the information about the monster in the movie well known. So when you go in and see the first scenes, there doesn't need to be a coy like scene setting a scary mood. You can actually just have a scene of two people going on a date, and then you know what you know based off like trailers and what people have told you. So those scenes that should just be like a low-key romance, teen love plots or whatever, has like a real sinister undertone. And the movie doesn't have to do any work to get you to get that feeling. It's just knowledge you have going into the movie. So I'm going to go over some baseline stuff about the movie first. And I recommend listening to it just because of what I just described. Like me, the movie's, 3 years old at this point. I can't do math. That's kind of embarrassing. 9 minus 6. I can do math. So I think at this point, if you have any interest in this movie, you have either seen it or you know like key plot points about it. So this may all be for nothing, but if this movie has been on your potential to view list for 3 years like it was for me, just hang in there. Just hang in there and give this little discussion a listen-y loo, because you will get that shortcut to a second viewing of this movie. Like, I mean, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about when I describe like watching a movie a second time and understanding more. But it's like Jumanji. When you see that for the second time and they read the box and it's like you're gonna have the adventure of your life. It's like, whoa. The first time you see that movie, like, yeah, whatever. It's just box. It's just words to sell stuff. But that second time you see that movie and you read those words, it's like, wow, they are gonna go on an adventure of their lifetime. Listening to this review and then watching it follows is going to be like watching Jumanji twice. So if that doesn't sell this episode, then just pretend it does and don't tell me, okay? All right, so the big overarching story of this movie is essentially there's an STD demon, an STDD, if you will, that follows people around if you've had sex with the previous person that was infected by the STDD. So you bump uglies with somebody, and then the demon starts following you. And the demon can only walk, right? It's a shape-shifting demon. It takes on different forms, and only people that have had the disease at some point can see the demon. So you doink somebody, the demon doesn't walk after you to kill you anymore. They're going to walk after the person you doinked to kill them. And if they kill that person, and then the demon comes back to kill you, it just kills down the chain, down the ladder until it gets to the bottom. And as far as we know, for most of the movie, there is no way to kill this thing. The only way to get rid of the STDD is to get nasty with somebody else. So that's the big PowerPoint of the movie right there. There's a demon that follows you, and to get rid of it, you gotta doink somebody. Okay? And if the demon dunks who you doinked, then the demon's gonna return to dunk on you until you doink somebody else again. See? It's simple. So now that you know that, you have all the power you need to watch this movie. Right, so now that you're properly equipped to watch this movie, let me just say, the directorial work of this movie and the cinematography of this movie is amazing. It's so good. Like, it's real good. The overall aesthetic of the movie is very good too. The way it presents itself is, I believe, like purposely not concrete. Like from the very first impulse of the movie, you're probably going to think it's like a 70s or 80s era movie. But there's a lot of like weird things peppered in that clearly are not from that era. And there's no like big deal made about it. I'm sure you've seen or heard of like the e-reader that's in the movie, and it's like shaped like a seashell, which of course clearly doesn't fit in the era of the 70s and 80s, but it's just a thing that exists. And even though, in my opinion, the kids act like modern teens to young 20s, like in their speech and their mannerisms and things like that, they still have their entertainment outlets in like old-fashioned kind of stuff. Like there's a couple scenes where there's just kids sitting on a couch in a very retro styled living room watching old and black and white serial movies. They go to a movie early on and it has somebody like playing a piano accompanying the movie. There's just a lot of like clashing arrows in the movie, and it's not even a point of like setting the groundwork for a fantasy world. All that stuff is more or less irrelevant to the movie. It's just where the movie takes place. Like there's no scene where a newspaper comes up and it's like 2017 news flash to where they like set a concrete year, and you're like, okay, this is just some fantasy uh retro future. It's just how the world is, and it's never brought to the forefront of the story or anything. Um, it's never a central part of the story. It's just like a weird fantasy dream world where this story takes place. And I would say something like that does wonders to sell a story about a demon that's contracted through coitus. Because if the movie was set like hard set like in a city or something, or just in a rural town that everybody knows and is familiar with, and then all of a sudden there's this invisible STD demon, it's there's like implied disconnect there. So at least for me, I can never like fully get immersed or connected to the movie. But having the world be so juxtaposed between different eras just in the background, and just having it be how it is with no, really not even extra attention, just no attention at all paid to it, does a lot to, like, as a background process, get you ingrained in the world. So believing this fantasy demon is a part of this world just happens naturally. It's great. It's hard to describe, but I can't think of any other movie that works like that. Where, like, there's clearly just a weird, goofy fantasy world, and the director doesn't do a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to it. And related to that, in regards to the characters themselves, I found at the beginning I was super confused on like what ages the characters were supposed to be. Like, there's main character girl, and she has clearly a younger sister, and the younger sister gives off the vibe that she's like in high school, and the main character girl, at least at the beginning for me, gave off the vibes that maybe she was in college. Not like any later than that, of course, but there was a clear gap between the two. And there's a scene that like illustrates the younger sister is at least 18, so we know that much. And there's an opening scene where the younger sister is in a living room with two other friends, so I assume they were the same age. But then you find out later on, via dialogue between the characters, that like interactions they've had in the past makes it seem like the whole group is in a very close age range. And it might even be that the older sister is like a week older than the younger sister. But the way she's cast and the way she carries herself makes it seem like she's at least a few years older. But then it also seems like maybe they all go to the same school, so maybe they're all still in high school. But it's just vagaries that are never like fully expounded upon, which, like I said, is super good in this case. It did a lot to sell the story of the movie to me. I don't want to talk forever about what I'll call the vagaries of the movie, the overall vague veil of the movie, but that may have overall been my favorite part of it, just the way that was handled. But pretty much every aspect of the movie is like seeping in that vibe, that everything is a little off, but it's just how it is. It's not so off, it's like it rips you out of the movie. There's just like little things here and there that are like, wow, that's kind of weird, but they're not. I don't know, just the way the characters interact with things like that makes it seem so natural that you just buy into it. And it does a lot to get you immersed in the movie. And before I get into spoilery stuff, I will say there aren't really jump scares in this movie. Based on like the nature of the monster itself, there's no jump scares. It's actually handled super well, and like my favorite way of handling monsters and scares in movies like this. A lot of times the monster is on screen and like it's making its moment. There's no big musical sting or anything. There's a lot of times where it's just on the screen and there's no like music at all, or just the music is regular, like music that would fit the scene if the monster wasn't there. And just in general, that makes the scares a lot better, in my opinion, personally. Like if you have to rely on a big musical strike to deliver your scare, then I think you should probably be reworking some of your scenes. But with the way the monster works in this movie, as I said way earlier on, it's a shape-shifting kind of monster, so they play a lot with the idea that the monster could be anybody. So there are some scenes where, like, a person is walking in from the background, and the characters like are facing the other way and they don't see it, and they're just chatting like normal, the music's in the background like normal, and there's just this person walking towards them. And since the monster can only walk and it's a shapeshifter, you as the viewer aren't even sure if that's the monster or it's a regular person. So it adds an extra layer of like uncertainty and fear to the situation, because not only are the characters unaware and you got that feeling of, oh god, this monster's coming up on them and it's gonna do their monster thing to them, but also in the back of your mind, you're like, is this even the monster? It could just be a person, and there's no musical cue to unravel those thoughts for you. Like, there's no dead giveaway that it's either the monster or just a regular person. So on top of dealing with the regular fear, you're like all confused and discombobulated about the whole situation. So it layers up on itself in a really good way, in my opinion. And sort of also related to that, when the monster is introduced, it's very sort of vaguely introduced. You get the concept of it from expositional dialogue from one of the main characters, and that's it. You understand that it walks, that only people that have been affected with the disease can see it, and it's not dumb. So it can think, it can try to trick you, but it can only walk. But then as the movie goes, certain situations pop up where you start to wonder what the monster's powers actually are and how it interacts with like the world and people around it. And I just assumed they would never be explained. I had these questions in my head. I was like, oh, what does it do for doors? What does it do when it runs into people? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, whatever, this movie's probably going to gloss over them, and that's fine. It doesn't need to make this monster super believable. But most of those questions and more actually are answered slowly throughout the movie in situations that like really elevate the situation they're in. I will say though, to pivot a little bit, as much as I am piling praise onto this movie, I can't say it's like a perfect movie. I would definitely recommend to see it for anybody who likes horror movies. Definitely 100% a recommendation, but it's not a perfect movie, but it's so close to being a perfect movie. It's like you go to your favorite restaurant and you order your favorite dish, and the waiter's bringing it over, but you notice the plate he has balanced on his hand is like severely cracked down the middle. And you're like, oh god, any second that plate's just gonna crack open and everything's gonna just come falling down. If the plate gets delivered to your table, the food's gonna be fine. It's gonna be a great meal still, but that plate, like, it's about to break. And to demetaphorize that, the biggest issue I had with the movie, and I promise this isn't a contradiction, the biggest issue I have with the movie is the overall feel of the movie. Because this movie is like 80% of a perfect horror movie, and it's also 80% of a perfect, like, a buddy adventure movie, like Goonies or Stand By Me. I haven't seen Stand By Me in so long. I think that's a similar movie though, where like the band of friends go out to reach a goal or solve an adventure. Like, it has the vibe of both of those movies, but it can't or doesn't fully hit either of them. It blends 80% of both of them well enough into each other, but as we all know, 80 out of 100 is a B, and two 80s make a 60 out of 200, which is, well, that math is wrong. It's still a good movie. I've lost my bad grading metaphor at this point, but what I'm trying to say is the fact that it almost perfectly does two different genres of movies at the same time amplifies the fact that it failed on both of them. I don't know how to word that in a way that lets you know it's still a good movie. It just fell short of two different genres at the same time. So it can't be perfect. You just gotta trust me. It's a great movie. Just by my nature, I gotta find some flaw in something. This may be a spoiler-free episode. There really isn't too much to spoil. Like, if you strip the movie down to its events, it is sort of boring and repetitive if you think about it. So, like going into in-depth spoilers like I sometimes do sort of isn't worth it. It's more of an experience movie, like getting yourself lost in the movie's world and its aesthetic is like the main draw of the movie for me, I'd say. It does get sort of formulaic where event 1 happens and event 2 happens, then it causes event 3 to happen, which is a copy of event 1, which will cause event 4 to happen, which is a copy of event 2. I don't know why I get needlessly potentially confusing like that, but it makes sense to me as I say it. Pretty much, you know that the monster chases person and they want to get away. So pretty much it's a chase. It's a very slow speed monster chase movie from one set piece to the next, which sounds sort of lame, but once again, it just adds to the movie. Like you never know when that monster is going to show up. And even when it does show up, you're not even sure if it is the monster showing up or just a person walking in the background. It's really refreshing and great and always keeps you on your toes for how repetitive it is. And I think a lot of that has to do with something I wanted to touch on earlier, but I got distracted, and that's the direction and cinematography of this movie. There are a couple of scenes, especially one in a school where they go to like the a front clerk or something of the school to get records on another student, and the camera just does this slow 360 turn for like 2 loops, and mechanically I guess you could say that's an entirely pointless shot. Most people would just have the camera locked on the characters asking a question to the receptionist, flip the camera, have the receptionist answer, and focus on the kids. But I don't know, just the decision to do that 360 camera sweep. It's just a very slow 360 sweep, and it does it twice. You get a good look at the environment all around where the characters are. There's windows everywhere, so you see people outside walking around. So, at least for me, I imagine the intent was, 1, to soak up the scene, and 2, just to see, like, to give you an idea of how, like, horrible and scary and terrifying it would be to have this monster following you, because anybody that's walking around could potentially be the monster. So as the camera's like 360 rotating, it pans by this huge window twice, and there's like 3 people walking around outside and 1 person walking directly towards the window. And you could tell yourself, oh, that's the monster because it's walking directly to the protagonist, or it's just a person walking directly towards the window because they want to enter the building. And you never know. It's never answered, and it doesn't need to be answered. It's the kind of thing that just lingers in the back of your head. And that's not the only shot like that, by a long shot. shot. That trick is employed a lot, and it never really feels like a gimmick. Like, you never get a weird shot that lingers too long, or a very artistically shot camera sweep or anything like that. You never see that shot and you go, oh, here's the scene where we're not sure if it's the monster or not. Like, every time, you're just super focused on the scene and everything going on in that scene, just trying to pick apart the details, try to find evidence or proof that the monster is coming or not, if our characters are safe or not. It's really well done, unspoken tension added to the movie, which, once again, maybe I'm just watching the wrong movies, but I don't think happens too often in horror movies, especially modern horror movies, where everything's just an orchestra hit with a monster popping up at the camera. But that's another topic for another day. Actually, before I end, I do have one more minor complaint, and it's about the very end, and I won't spoil the very end, but it really seemed, at least to me, like the kind of movie that needed more of a punch at the finale. Like, the end just sort of lingers, and I get it. It's the typical leave the ending open to the viewer's interpretation, but I really feel like the movie would have ended on a lot more of a memorable note if a clear direction was taken and it was really hammered home. I don't know why I get that feeling. Normally I'm very into open interpretation endings because it leaves a lot to discuss. But I guess maybe that's why. With the open ending of this movie, there's not a lot to discuss. Either A happens or B happens. So you're not gonna hang out in the driveway with your friends drinking some beers after this movie talking like, oh man, I wonder what happened at the end. It's either you think A happened or B happened. Whereas if they chose to go hard on A or hard on B, then you could like discuss the ramifications of that. But minor point. My two gripes of the movie are very minor points, and I hope it does not dissuade you from watching the movie. Overall, I would say I super liked this movie. That's part of my new rating scale I just came up with, by the way. You'll figure out the full scale as I figure it out, but I'm giving it a super like for right now. It's not a super duper like. A super duper like is the top. That's the cream of the crop, the super duper like. It's just a super like. I super liked this movie, and I super think you should watch it as well. And sorry if you wanted a spoiler jingle in this review / discussion, but you don't need to spoil every movie, and I didn't need to spoil this one. So let's put a spoiler-free button on the end of this discussion and say watch this movie. Atmosphere is amazing in this movie. The aesthetic is very good in this movie. A very good experience movie. I found lately I really enjoy experience movies versus movies that tell like a solid story. I like movies that get your brain's gears rotating in ways they don't normally rotate. You know, like instead of just rotating vertically, I like ones that just rip the gears out and puts it horizontally and just messes with your brain. Right? You know what I'm saying? My brain's messed up. You see what I'm saying? At any rate, I'm hoping to do 2 movies next month. Maybe I'll do the weirdo movie thing, and I'll do Under the Silver Lake and Lighthouse. Maybe I'll do 2 of those next month. And then I'm planning on something a little extra for December, but we'll see how that rolls out. December's a very busy month, so we'll see how that goes. But for now, I hope you enjoyed the movie discussion. I hope you see the movie and enjoy the movie, but I hope you enjoyed this movie discussion. I hope you enjoyed the name of the program. I hope you enjoyed the name of the website. I hope you enjoyed the website. The banner of the website is a picture I took in high school. So that is my old professional camera work. Very artistic stuff. I seen some movies.com, by the way. If you're still watching this only on YouTube, you should check out the website, I seen some movies.com. And scene is just SEEN. I was very much debating on if I should make scene SCENE or not, but I figured that was a little too witty, so I just kept it scene. So until next time, keep your ears plugged on ISeenSomeMovies.com, on my Twitter, on my YouTube. I keep your eyes on my YouTube too. If you like staring at a still moving, not a still moving, a single image while listening to this, more power to you, and keep your eyes on that. Until next time, see you around.